Hi, I'm Carrie. I'm a psychology major, and so I learned in my class the other day about this concept called learned helplessness. And basically, what learned helplessness is, it's the idea that past failures are significant of the present and the future, and that they mean that you can't do something because of something you failed at in the past. So if you've ever said something like, oh, I'm bad at science, I'm bad at math because you failed a math test or a science test in the past, like it may have been just because you didn't have time to study or because you weren't in class that week, but that idea starts to instill in your head and to make you think that you're not good at it. And in the future, that will be induced. The idea of learned helplessness will make you feel as if you're not good at the entire subject, even though it may have just been that one incident. So basically, just the entire idea of learned helplessness is that you're bad at something, and that's not necessarily true. This originated scientifically from a man named Martin Seligman. He was an American psychologist, and in 1967, he did this experiment with dogs to prove a theory of classical conditioning, which is basically the process that a human or animal associates one thing with another. So what he did was he had several dogs, and he would ring a bell and then he would shock them. And what this did was it made the dog associate the ringing of the bell with being shocked. So it came to a point where he would just ring the bell and they would react as if they'd been shocked, but they hadn't. They had just come to believe that when the bell was rung, they were going to feel the shock. And then in the second part of the experiment, he actually put the dogs in like these large crates, and in the middle of the crates there was a low fence so they could see over, and there was a light, and he would the light would go off and he would shock them, and then on the other side of the fence it actually wasn't electrified, but the dogs who had been before shocked, they believed that there was nothing they could do to get out of the situation, so they just laid down, when originally he would think that they would jump over the fence to get away from the shock, but they just laid down because they'd learned that there was nothing they could do to control the outcome. However, when tested on dogs that had not been in the first part of the experiment, the dogs jumped over the fence because they had not previously learned that there was nothing they could do to get out of the shocking situation. And for that reason, he proves it with this experiment that the past failures are impactful of future potential successes. So basically just the idea of cause and effect, uncontrollable bad events such as a failed test based on not studying or not being in class leads to perceived lack of control, which essentially leads to feeling as if you have no control over a situation and you do badly overall. In my psych class, my professor handed out to one half of the class, which we'll call Group A, pieces of paper with 3 words on them, and then to Group B, the other half of the class, he handed a piece of paper with 3 different words on them. Well, these are called anagrams, and an anagram is basically like a word that you can rearrange the letters to make another word. So for Group A's list, bat can be rearranged to tab, and lemon can be rearranged to melon, but on Group B's list, the first 2 words do not have anagrams. So what happened is he would ask that we raise our hand when we figured out the anagram, and half of the class was raising their hand and was feeling confident, and so by the 3rd word, which is cinerama, which both groups had, the group with the bat and the lemon actually answered this question like much better than the second half, because the second half couldn't do the first 2 words, and that instilled a sense of an inability to do it, and they started to feel like they were lesser or like less smart than everyone else. And so instead of like actually using the word and actually thinking about it, they were just like, oh, I can't do it. So basically this is the idea of learned helplessness again, and this is how it is applied to an academic setting, which is the way that it's generally talked about in psychology. So basically just back to the whole cycle of learned helplessness, the idea of success building on success and failure building on failure, it's just a whole like mindset. Basically like the psychological mindset of not being good enough like leads to you actually not being good enough. So basically like some solutions to this would be especially in the academic setting from the beginning, students being in a more structured environment with teachers who understand this, and not having like the outgoing students talk more and the quiet students talk less. They need to kind of facilitate it more so that students like can reach their full potential. That's like the main thing. And then also just like raising awareness of this and like having goals like unique to each person, as like everyone learns differently. And basically the idea of learned helplessness will not be induced if you acknowledge that you're not necessarily bad at something just because you failed in the past, and you just keep trying to the point of you don't let the past failures define your future potential successes.